Have to wait. Get the signal. I now call to order the lecture portion of the Society's 2,532nd meeting in what is now the 154th year since its founding on March 13th, 1871. So shortly to be the 155th year. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Larry Milstein. I am the president of PSW, one of the oldest scientific societies of Washington, D.C., committed to providing a forum to further scientific understanding and inquiry. Welcome to our members, guests, and friends to the lecture part of today's PSW meeting and to the lecture by Jonathan Coopersmith on Robert Goddard and the invention of the liquid-fueled rocket. And a special welcome to newcomers here and online for the first time, in particular, any PSW meetup members who met up for PSW's pre-lecture get-together at a local hangout with PSW member-at-large Ellie Wonder and PSW member David Graham. Thanks, Ellie and David, and welcome. The Society is grateful to our sponsors, and let's start by thanking PSW member Mike Helton and Helton Associates for being the 2025-2026 full-year sponsors. Thank you, Mike. And our other full-year sponsor for 2025-2026, PSW member Joe Schulman and the Schulman Foundation. Thank you, Joe. These sponsors keep us solvent, and they pay for this room. It's no longer free. And we also want to thank the sponsor of tonight's lecture, PSW member Cyprian Ivanov. Thank you. The Society needs your support to meet its expenses for the year. So if you've not given or feel you can give more than you already have, please don't hesitate to donate. You can do it by going to the website and accessing the Pay Us Money button. All right. I'm pleased to announce the following new members. Briggs Burton, a wealth management executive at Morgan Stanley, interested in geology and astronomy, medicine, and science communication. I learned of PSW from the Smithsonian Archives website. And tonight's speaker, Jonathan Coopersmith, who will now be a speaker member, whose interest will be clear to you in a small part from tonight's lecture. All members are entitled to a signed copy of Compendium Volume 17 of the Bulletin of the PSW. And if you're a new member and you haven't received yours, please come see me after the meeting. All members also are invited to the pre-lecture receptions and dinners with speakers for camaraderie and interesting discussion, generally free of politics, believe it or not. If you're interested in membership, you can access a membership application on the PSW website by clicking the blue Join button on the upper right-hand corner of the home page. And if you're here in the Powell Auditorium, there are some business cards in the back with QR codes that you can use to access the membership application. PSW Science membership is open to everybody. I emphasize that, everybody, with a genuine interest in science and the free exchange of scientific information, informed discussion on scientific subjects, and the promotion of scientific inquiry. Recording Secretary Scott Matthews will now present the minutes of the 2531st meeting and a lecture by Karen Lloyd on intraterrestrials, the strangest life on Earth. Scott, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Larry. Good evening. On February 20th, 2026, members of the Society and guests joined the speaker for a reception and dinner at 5:45 in the members' dining room at the Cosmos Club. Thereafter, they joined other attendees in the Powell Auditorium for the lecture proceedings. In the Powell Auditorium of the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C., President Larry Milstein called the lecture portion of the 2531st meeting of the Society to order at 8:02 p.m. Eastern Time. He began by welcoming attendees, thanking sponsors for their support, announcing new members, and inviting guests to join the Society. Scott Matthews then read the minutes of the previous meeting, which included the lecture by Stephen Eckel titled Measuring the Emptiness of a Vacuum. The minutes were approved as read. President Milstein then introduced the speaker for the evening, Karen Lloyd of the University of Southern California. Her lecture was titled Intraterrestrials, the Strangest Life on Earth. The speaker began by discussing early work attempting to correlate the population of a particular microbe as a function of methane concentration, only to find that the vast majority of the collected microbes were, in fact, unidentified. She described the fact that these unidentified microbes were found in a variety of estuaries all over the Earth. She claimed that there are about 3 times 10 to the 29 living microbial cells buried in the Earth's seafloor. She said that the single-cell gene sequencing using flow cytometry allowed the identification of a number of genes from these, quote, archaea, a type of single-celled prokaryote organism whose name is derived from the ancient Greek word for ancient or primitive. Lloyd discussed the fact that these intraterrestrials were sequestering carbon in ways that could not have been predicted before the archaea were discovered. She described how tectonic subduction moved carbon down to the Earth's mantle, which could later be quantified by measuring both volcanic eruptions and hot springs. The speaker claimed that intraterrestrials could be major drivers of geological carbon sequestration underground. The speaker discussed the fact that because intraterrestrials are interacting with geology, it is reasonable to ask about their lifetimes, given that geological change happens on such long timescales. She described the amount of power available to cells on the seafloor for metabolism, indicating that there is insufficient power for them to reproduce, but nonetheless, they constitute one of the Earth's largest biospheres, comprising astronomical numbers of individual cells. Lloyd said that given the tiny amounts of energy in the interaction with geology, it is possible that these organisms live for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. As a result, she and her colleagues decided to call this class of organisms aneophiles. She discussed the process of acquiring samples from permafrost in the Arctic, samples which had been unchanged for approximately 120,000 years. She claimed that DNA extracted from Asgard archaea indicated that these aneophiles were in fact still alive. Lloyd claimed that these Asgard archaea have been grown in culture and that they have, quote, weird arm-like thingies, end quote. She said that these appendages may help them survive by reaching through tight pore spaces in marine sediments. The speaker then discussed possible ways to use intraterrestrials. These included carbon sequestration and precious metal recycling. She said that intraterrestrials produce large numbers of proteins which are very dissimilar to known proteins. She indicated that these unusual proteins could potentially be used for a wide variety of technological applications. Lloyd said that if intraterrestrials could provide proteins or enzymes to chelate metals, they could, quote, be the architects of their own salvation from deep-sea mining, which threatens their ecosystem. The speaker ended her talk by acknowledging her collaborators and funding agencies. The lecture was followed by a question and answer session. A member asked about the presence of parasites and viruses in the intraterrestrial biosphere. Lloyd responded, quote, "I think they are starving too," end quote, saying that the extremely low energy density in the seafloor makes it very difficult for all forms of life. A member asked what these results said about the possibility of life on other planets or moons. Lloyd responded that she feels relatively confident that there is life at the bottom of Europa's ocean, saying that she regularly goes to places on Earth that appear completely lifeless, only to find a variety of species thriving. A member asked whether deep-sea deposits of methane act as a food-rich environment for intraterrestrials, and if so, could they be used to prevent large quantities of methane from being released into the atmosphere? Lloyd responded, quote, "Thank you for bringing us back around to methane, her favorite molecule," end quote. She said that the problem with such a strategy would be timescale. Large releases of methane appear to be accelerating because the thawing of permafrost is rapid. She said that it might be possible to cultivate these organisms to metabolize methane faster, but that the slow growth rate of intraterrestrials makes it difficult. A member on the live stream asked about the morphology of liquid water in permafrost and if it was similar to the distribution of liquid water in deep-sea sediments. Lloyd responded that it was very different morphology, with liquid water in permafrost existing in, quote, brine veins, very small channels containing high concentrations of salt. A guest on the live stream asked, if there are intraterrestrials on Mars, how would you look for them? Lloyd responded that we would need to look for mud volcanoes. She said that it is widely believed that these structures bring surface material up to the Martian surface and that this would be the most likely place to find them. After the question and answer period, President Milstein thanked the speaker and presented her with a PSW rosette, a signed copy of the announcement of her talk, and a signed copy of Volume 17 of the PSW Bulletin. He then announced speakers of upcoming lectures and made a number of housekeeping announcements. He adjourned the 2,531st meeting of the Society at 9:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Temperature in Washington, D.C., 5.6 Celsius. Weather, light rain. Dinner attendance, 50. Lecture attendance, 96 in person, 43 on the live stream, for a total of 139 viewers. Views of the video in the first 2 weeks, 570. Respectfully submitted, Scott Matthews, Recording Secretary.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have any comments or corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion by a member to accept the minutes as read. Thank you, Bob and others. Do I have a second? All members in favor? All members opposed? The minutes are accepted as read and will be posted to the website in due course. We now turn to tonight's lecture by Jonathan Coopersmith on Robert Goddard and the invention of the liquid-fueled rocket. Jonathan is Professor Emeritus of the History of Technology at Texas A&M University, where he spent virtually all of his academic career. During that time, he also was a Fulbright visiting lecturer and researcher at the Tokyo Institute of Technology and a visiting professor at Virginia Tech. His work focuses on understanding how inventions are made and how technology is developed and comes into widespread use, viewed not only from our own U.S. national context, but more broadly in the context of international developments and cross-border influences. He's especially known for research and writing on the fax machine's multinational development, on Russian electrification, on technology transfer, and on failures in technology development. He's written numerous articles and several book chapters, as well as 2 books, one of which is Faxed, The Rise and Fall of the Fax Machine, and another is The Electrification of Russia, 1880 to 1926. And he is also co-editor with Roger Launius of Taking Off, A Century of Manned Flight. Among other honors and awards, he is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Received the Sally Hacker Prize of the Society for the History of Technology, and his book Facts was a co-recipient of the Business History Conference Hagley Prize. He earned an AB in History and the Philosophy of Science at Princeton and a DPhil in Modern History at the University of Oxford. All questions will be fielded after the lecture during our usual lively Q&A session. Jonathan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. As a historian, it's a particular honor to be following in the steps of previous speakers over the last century and a half, and I want to thank the club very much for this opportunity. By coincidence, 10 days from now will mark the 100th anniversary of Robert Goddard's liquid-fueled rocket test. Entirely coincidental, but you may be hearing a little bit more about that in the future. Goddard was helped create the first successful liquid-fueled rocket, and until Goddard, rockets were mostly solid fuel. And what that means is that you had a finite amount of fuel stored in the rocket. Once the fuel was ignited, it couldn't be turned off. We're going to see later that some of the advantages of liquid fuel are greater energy capacity, so the same amount or the same weight goes a longer way, and you can control it. You can turn it on, off, and then back again. Much better than solid fuel that way. There are also a lot of challenges with liquid fuel, as anybody who's worked with plumbing can testify. Oops, let me press the right button. And when I talk about Robert Goddard, I'm also going to spend time talking about his wife, who not only outlived him by a quarter of a century, but helped organize him, helped promote him while he was living and after his death, preserved his papers and published them. And of the 214 patents that Robert Goddard had, Esther is responsible for 131 of them becoming patents. She is the strong force behind Goddard. I should say that Goddard, like a lot of other people in the late 19th century, early 20th, and even today, inspired by Jules Verne. Is there anybody here who has not read a novel by Jules Verne? If not, you should, and then I expect you after do that saying, "Let's go." He said. And in another historic pathway, Goddard had his revelation, his idea about space while he was in a cherry tree. Instead of pruning it, as he should have been, he was daydreaming instead. The benefits to the owner of the cherry tree were none, but the benefits to humanity were great as a result of his afternoon musings, and makes you appreciate fall in New England. Goddard also more BA in physics, a PhD in physics, also from New England universities. By 1914, he had his first two patents, very important patents, one describing a multi-stage rocket. That is, instead of the rocket having only one stage, you turn it on and it goes until it stops. Multi-stage rocket means that you can, when the first stage is empty, you can drop it, and all of a sudden the amount of weight that you have to propel forward drops by a great deal. Multi-stage rockets and liquid fuel are a huge technological improvement over the solid fuel rockets of the 19th century. Goddard, in addition to patents, was also a very good seeker of grants. In this case, in 1917, he wrote to the Smithsonian saying, I want to write about or explore space. Smithsonian gave him $5,000, which in today's money is about somewhat over $100,000. In 1919, the Smithsonian published his small booklet, about 80 pages, a method of reaching extreme altitudes. If you suffer from insomnia, it's a great read. What made this noteworthy was the press coverage. The Smithsonian very unusually sent out a press release, and that got media attention. A lot of it was, what do you mean you can operate a rocket in a vacuum? Because the assumption was the prevailing physics record, the prevailing assumption of physics at that time was you need something to react against, like air. You can't react. And Goddard said you could do it. So, fortunately, you had the New York Times in 1920 setting the record straight. Now, in fairness to the New York Times, we'll see later, they did correct their error in July of 1969. Instead, what Goddard got, it received, Goddard's work received a lot of attention, most of it of, these stupid professors, there's impractical idiots who couldn't tie their shoe or, actually cut, get cherries out of a cherry tree. So lots of wonderful coverage, wonderful if you like to be amused, coverage about these impractical academics. What also happened when the Smithsonian sent out that report, as well as lots of newspaper articles and some very nice editorial cartoons, Goddard got hundreds of letters attacking him, praising him, and volunteering to go into space. So the idea of being the first astronaut in space goes back to 1920. One of the consequences of this is that Goddard still communicated with the press. He was one of the secrets to his success was that he talked to the media. He talked to newspapers, really. But after this, he didn't volunteer information unless he was asked. Indeed, when he actually launches his rocket in 1926, first launch of a liquid fuel rocket anywhere, he basically doesn't tell anybody not involved with it for a decade afterwards. He just stays quiet. But what this rocket launch did was to introduce a whole new world of potential propulsion for going into space or doing anything else with rockets. This launch, again, in 10 days, it'll be a century, really did set the groundwork for 20th century rocketry. showing it was possible, it could be done, and with tales of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky in Russia, Hermann Obreth in Germany, maybe it should be done from a national security viewpoint, or from, if the Russians are doing it, if the Germans are doing it, maybe we should too. And what you get out of this also, as well as this semi-competitive cooperative rivalry, particularly in Goddard, a sense of secrecy, of, I don't want to tell anybody anything because they'll steal it and they'll claim it, and they'll claim it's theirs. It's a very good lesson in the failure of scientists communicating, and it's more common than we would like to think. If you look at the actual rocket that Goddard launched in 1926, it doesn't look much like a contemporary rocket. For one thing, the actual rocket nozzle is at the top and the fuel tank is at the bottom. Goddard did that for this, thinking having the fuel tank, the heavier fuel tank at the bottom, would be better for stability. Turns out it wasn't, and consequent rockets put the engine at the bottom. And Goddard launched this again in 1926. Really didn't talk about it publicly for about a decade later. And his view of secrecy, his paranoia about people stealing his work or taking advantage, meant that he did not reach out to other people. And when they tried to reach out to him, for example, the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory at Caltech reached out to him in the 1930s and said, "We would like to work with you." And he basically, literally, there's an example of Frank Molina, who famous for helping develop the Jet Propulsion Lab, touring Goddard's lab. And the story is, "Oh, there's my rocket," pointing to an object that's covered in canvas. "And there, I've got a lot of other research. Let's go to the other room now." So it does make you wonder, what if Goddard had been more cooperative? What if the Guggenheim Foundation, which funded Goddard and funded the Guggenheim Aeronautical Lab at Caltech, called Coopersmith, what if it had pushed its recipients to cooperate together? What might have happened then? So, see, lots of possible paths that were not followed. So what happens after this is, the rocket at the top. Goddard, until he dies in 1935, continues his interest in rockets. He actually designs, builds, and launches 35 different rockets. You see a picture of a couple of them, and notice the fact that you've got 5 guys holding this long rocket. Do not try this with a rocket today. And indeed, in addition to launching developing and launching 35 rockets, he's the first person to launch a scientific payload in 1929. Had a barometer, a thermometer, a camera. That launch also was his last launch in Massachusetts. It turned out that the Massachusetts State Fire Marshal said, we really don't think you should be launching rockets which spew flame and may break things. Indeed, you're banned from doing them. Which is why why Goddard in 1930 moves to Roswell, New Mexico, which has lots of open spaces and very few people to complain about rocket launches. I should mention that what Goddard does a lot is not just developing rockets. He's working by himself and with a small crew, working on supporting technologies that will make parts of the rocket work better, more efficiently, longer. Things like, oh, by the way, tracking and recording. How do we know what we've done? So a lot of the basics of what we consider normal in rocket launching now developed in the 1920s, 1930s by Goddard. And again, for the most part, operating by himself, a closed group of people, but a lot of progress. Some of this progress, here, by the way, if you're ever wondering what a liquid oxygen flask carrier looks like, didn't go into space, but this was how do you get the flasks of liquid oxygen from where you fill them with the liquid oxygen to the actual rocket? You need a flask carrier. A lot of supporting technologies that we don't think of. And the next time you're at the Smithsonian American History, ask to see that. It's there. Indeed, Goddard gave the Smithsonian a lot of stuff. So let's hear it for one of the advantages of living in Washington, D.C. Goddard was able to do as much as he did because of two men, Charles Lindbergh, Harry Guggenheim, and to be precise, because of the money that these two men were able to send him. One of the well-known problems of doing research and development is you can have the best idea in the world, you can have the best people who want to work for you. If you don't have the resources, if you don't have the money, it doesn't work. And what Lindbergh and Guggenheim did was to fund Goddard over many years and keep his work funded after he died in 1945. But again, this is one of the great questions of what if other rocketeers or people, if funding had been more available for other people, as opposed to Goddard, who developed very nice connections with these folks. The Smithsonian really made Goddard's work possible. It not only gave him financial support, but it gave him legitimacy too. And by publishing his method of reaching extreme altitudes in 2019, made Goddard a national figure. In many ways, a controversial national figure, but really great name recognition. But Smithsonian, it's important to recognize funding, and particularly this Smithsonian. The amount of money was not that great certainly not by 21st century standards, but it was enough to get Goddard going and off the ground. This is just there were a lot of editorial cartoons from Goddard. This is one of them that I really like, with the sense of there's the the rocket and the moon at the top saying, "I'm afraid," as it should be. Just think of the mess that's been left on the moon now. Actually, if you there's at least one group that has done some work in looking at lunar archaeology. That is where humans have left stuff on the moon, ranging from bits and pieces of dead rockets and satellites to scientific satellites. There are over 100. If you wanted to go tour them, there are over 100 spots you could visit on the moon today. And if you come up with a way to make that trip to moon tourism viable, let me know. So Goddard did become, if not a household name, a very well-known person. I don't know how many of you have ever used Google's Ngram, where it basically traces mentions of whatever you put over time, and this, you've got two bits of red. The first red at the bottom is the year that Goddard died. The red circle to the left, 1957, 1958. There's suddenly a huge interest in people trying to find out about Goddard. And the reason for that? Sputnik. The Russians launched the first satellite. And all of a sudden, interest soars. So, by the way, engrams are a wonderful tool for tracing the popularity of concepts or people or words over time. And this just, again, that huge rise over Sputnik, the drop and the rise. So Goddard had a huge influence. And as I said, the New York Times apologized. It took a little bit of time, and independent verification of Goddard, a courtesy of the U.S. government funding the Apollo project. But how often do you see a newspaper admitting error? So I'd like to end, not with that, but to mention Congress. March 16th, that is the anniversary of Goddard's talk, declared Goddard Day, National Goddard Day, 1965. For those of you who are interested, 10 days from now, it's the Goddard Centennial celebration. You can go to Goddard 100th and celebrate a person who a century ago launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket and set the world on a completely different path than it had been following before. And with that, thank you very much.
Stay there.
Okay.
Q&A. We have time for some questions. As many of you know, there's a procedure involving microphones that are red and blue. Mike, you keep your hand up long enough, and eventually somebody with a microphone will bring it to you. When they do, don't do anything with it. It's on. And I will call on people by the color of the microphone. And when I do, and you have it, you will stand up. You will tell us your name. You will ask a question. And then we'll hear an answer, hopefully. So we'll start with Cyprian and the blue microphone.
Cyprian Ivanov, member. During World War II, there were a number of developments in rocketry, and it seems unusual that Goddard isn't really mentioned in regards to that. What was he doing during that era?
He actually did a little bit of work with JATO, jet-assisted takeoff for airplanes, but for the most part, he sat out the war years. He was a little bit active with the JATO, but otherwise not. Again, by that time, he's aging, he's in ill health, and he actually dies in 1945. But he did work on JATO, which was a minor but important tool of the war. But again, the Americans did not do major rocket development like the Germans. And the Germans were unique in that. They were the exception.
Red microphone.
Okay, Colin Alberts, I am a member. Is there evidence, either by citation or by correspondence, to figure out, was Goddard first part of the question, was Goddard in touch with and aware of the work that Tchaikovsky and Oberth were doing in Russia and Germany, respectively? And connected with that is that neither of those two men were really either great organizers, I would say, either. But nevertheless, there seemed to be, like in both countries, a critical mass of crazy kids who would basically, who figured it out and were working on it all by themselves, independent of, the way they were taking it. So you had like Korolev in Russia, or Willy Ley and Werner von Braun in Germany, again, the crazy kids. How come there wasn't, especially at a time in the 1920s when aviation was almost had almost sort of a religious fervor in America at the time, why wasn't there just like a groundswell of like nerds who would try to build rockets in a systematic way?
The short answer is building rockets takes resources, and the people who were most interested didn't have those resources. And there were other, like you said, the excitement of aviation, a lot of possible paths that you could follow that had funding, that had prestige. Rockets were seen as something really weird and out there. Rockets were something you launched on July 4th. And you did have efforts in Germany, some effort. You really didn't have Tsiolkovsky, really ahead of his time, writing in Russian, not that well publicized outside of Russia, and really no resources to turn his ideas into reality. There was a bit of an effort by the end of his life, but really never went anywhere. I shouldn't say the market wasn't there. Trying to find people to fund rocket development when there are other options, like you discussed, for that money, for those skills. Rockets. Rockets are for 4th of July, and it didn't help also that Goddard, especially after 1920, is keeping everything as secret as possible. And Oberth in Germany is not exactly a major publicist himself, and they're all thinking that guy's stealing information from me, so I've got to keep it covered. I mean, it really is a wonderful example of independent invention leading to massive paranoia.
But was he aware of Tchaikovsky?
Hey, Colin, you need a microphone.
The short answer is yes. But I didn't hear that.
Repeat the question.
Okay, the question was Goddard aware of Tsiolkovsky? Was he aware of Oberth? And the answer is he was sort of aware of Tsiolkovsky, but that was in Russia. Oberth really didn't reach out to him until the 1920s. What's really interesting is how these people did not communicate with each other, viewing, again, thinking of secrecy, thinking of theft, of information theft, and not really thinking of it in a military way. Oh, if I give this to him, if I give this information to Oberth, this is going to help the German military. I mean, Goddard is a little suspicious of the Germans, but mid-20s he does start communicating with Oberth, and it's not a we're the best of all pals, but there is communication between them.
How hard was it to get liquid oxygen?
You had to make your own. So you needed certain facilities, you needed the resources to make that, and you had to have storage facilities. So liquid oxygen was a promising oxidizer, but it was very hard to deal with because not only did you have to convert oxygen from air to liquid, you had to store it. It was a big technology of the time.
Blue microphone.
Justin Tang, University of Maryland, non-member. So you mentioned, this question may be related to the previous question the gentleman asked. So you mentioned that Goddard already starting to patenting some of the rocket technology at the beginning of 20th century. I wonder what he's protecting from at that time. Are there evidence of commercial activity going on around in US that leads to this protection?
No. I mean, one of the reasons Goddard was able to patent these field-setting patents is that nobody else was really doing this. But I think his paranoia and some of the sense of if I patent it, I can show it's mine, that I was the inventor. That I think if you look at a lot of patents that are made, they aren't made with the expectation of getting money, though there might be a hope, but it's to say, I patented this. I'm the inventor. I mean, it's really a patent. If you've got a patent, you've earned a giant lollipop, and the rest of the world should be properly impressed. And by the way, if you do want to have fun, look at the number of patents that are never used. And you'll be surprised. And it's not. And a lot of that is just a lot of ideas don't pan out or they get replaced by something. But in some cases, it's just I want a patent to show that it's mine.
Can I make a comment? Would that be okay, Frederica? I want permission.
Yes.
No, she's not saying yes. So we'll move on to a question. Red microphone.
Oh, I just wanted to know if you could give us a very short description of what Goddard's wife did to publicize and to make the world known about his stuff, particularly after his death. You know?
Okay. First thing she did, she organized his papers. Then she started publishing them. She actually, if you want to read the 1940s published collected, I forget the exact title, collected papers of Robert Goddard, she helped do that. She was the major force behind that. So she did. So those were some of the activities that she did, and she collected and she pushed him to patent. She, of the 214 patents he got, he developed them all, but she was the one in 131 cases went through his files and said, with a lawyer, and said, "Hey, this one, let's go." So she was, without her, we would be speaking. We wouldn't quite be saying this Robert Goddard guy. Who is he? But he would be a lot less known, and there would be a lot less known about him. So, if you know anybody who's doing patenting or inventing, encourage them to keep files and preserve them for the future, for later, for the next generation of historians.
Are there any questions from the web? From our chat on the live stream? Let's go to a couple of those.
We have a few questions from the web. The first one is from Thomas Carr, who is joining us from Kent Island on the Eastern Shore. Who else funded Goddard's team other than Guggenheim and Lindbergh?
The Smithsonian did, starting in 1919. And there's a perpetual quest for money, and by Goddard during these days. You really don't see any military money coming in until World War II, and that's for specific, not, oh, we want to fund you to send a rocket into space, but we want you to develop this jet-powered or takeoff tool. Does that answer the?
I think so, yes. It's a constant search of funding. A follow-up question from Eric in Sweden, who is not a member, asks, did Goddard ever work with Jack Parsons?
I don't know.
Okay. And another short question from Paul Jaffe in Springfield, Virginia, who is a member, asks, is Goddard's wife biography chronicled in any book?
I think the short answer is yes, and the longer answer is I can't remember exactly. I'm afraid you've got an academic who can be absent-minded in all the wrong ways.
And we have one last question from Ej, who joins us from College Park, Maryland, who is a member, who asks, how did the liquid propellants evolve throughout Goddard's career, from the beginning to the end?
They become much more, the rockets, the propellants don't evolve that much. The system evolved greatly. They become much more efficient. The nozzle, for example, becomes far more effective at turning energy into propulsion. So the rocket the liquid-fueled rocket of 2026 is much less efficient than the one in 36 or 45.
Thank you.
Blue microphone, Humberto.
Umberto Caldelas, member. Was there like an enabling technology, or material or concept that you feel really made Robert Goddard stand out against everyone else who was doing rocket development at the time?
He had a more comprehensive view of what's involved in launching a rocket, and his knowledge, both theoretical and hands-on, was not just, oh, let's build a rocket stage, but what are all the components that we need? Because in those days, when you wanted to launch a rocket, if you had to build it yourself, you had to come up with it, and you had to do everything. And Goddard was able to work all of that through, and to get good supporters and enough financial support from the Smithsonian, and having, by the way, Charles Lindbergh and Harry Guggenheim as supporters really, really helped him. If not for them, we might be saying, we got Robert who. So the next time you have a brilliant idea, make sure you have a brilliant sponsor, or a brilliant.
Red microphone.
Hi, I'm Ann McQueen. I am a member. I was wondering what type of telemetry or data they collected from the rocket launches, specifically like airspeed or altitude, if they collected that at all, and also what did the launch cadence look like? How frequently was he launching?
In his over 15 from 1926, 45, 35 rocket launches in all, 35 different rockets too, and they were all individually made. And by looking at them and looking at their innards, you can see a lot of development between each one. So there's part of that is the rockets are being handmade in Goddard's lab and workshop by Goddard and a few staff who are very well trained, and you see them evolving a lot. The ones of your rocket of 1945 is a lot more efficient, can do more, and still, by the way, has problems and can blow up as the rockets of 1926.
Blue microphone.
Hi, Jason Winterberg. I'm a member. Regarding the propellant combination of LOX and gasoline, I mean, we still use that today. Did he get lucky in picking that, or was there something he was basing that propellant combination choice on? Something in industry or something?
I can't fully answer that question, but he was thrilled to be able to take liquid oxygen and be able to use it efficiently. He did, or use it effectively. he did work with others on that, how to get the. But even so, if you look at the efficiency of his rocket nozzles over time, they improve greatly. So that, and as mentioned, the rockets of 1945 are really impressive compared to the rockets of 1926.
Well, I'm going to leap into the little lapse here and ask a question, which is, the French have a saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
So a modern rocket developer named Elon Musk was criticized in the same way. Do you see the parallel with Elon Musk when he started out, and now Elon Musk with his rockets and going to Mars, which, people say, oh, that'll never work?
Actually, going to Mars will work, but a far more impressive contribution of Elon Musk is reducing the cost of reaching orbit. If you really want to make space accessible, like a lot of other places, reduce the cost of getting there. I think Elon Musk is saying you can get as low as somewhere between $1,000 or $10,000 a pound, depending upon how you're doing that. And if you ever want to feel like a millionaire, weigh yourself and think how much you're worth at $10,000 a pound. But what that means, is the more you can lower the cost of reaching orbit, the more accessible it becomes, and the easier it is for commercial use to develop, for other uses to develop, for people to experiment and explore. Final lesson, or a lesson, economics matters.
Red microphone.
Timothy Thomas, I'm a member of the Society. I'm wondering how successful the man was. How high did he get a rocket? How close was that to orbit? And what was his most successful launch in terms of altitude?
I'll take the next question. No. Goddard's rockets did not reach that high. I think 40 feet might have been the highest one. And then there was the one that went 40 feet the other way. I mean, this is, but you're looking, that rocket weighed 10 pounds, of which half of that was fuel. So we really aren't talking big rockets. And the weights, the supporting materials weighed a lot comparatively. So even by the standards of using an Estes rocket today, oh, how primitive. But by the standards of the 1920s and 30s and 40s, this really is cutting edge. And also, by the way, Goddard becomes a national figure subject to a lot of ridicule by thinking about, oh, you could go to the moon, which in 1920 is a good way to get ridiculed. The distances were not that great, but they were still greater than anything and even to get there, even to get that 40 feet, was an impressive accomplishment.
Blue microphone.
Hi, I'm Natalie Ryu, a guest. One last question. You had mentioned about keeping good notes as a scientist, and I know that there are some societies out there, like the American Institute of Physics, History of Physics. There's some organizations out there that do collect and keep these archives of information. What advice would you give to scientists and technologists out there in terms of what records are important to keep?
Okay. I would, and this, by the way, is one of the failings of the archival community. They tend to be very passive and wait. Although a lot of government agencies, such as NASA, they do have record-keeping policies. And what it would be great to see a project, sponsored by either a National Archives group or a private set of space-oriented archives, reaching out to companies to societies saying, here are ways of keeping your records. And one of the challenges is, okay, you're going to keep them, okay, you're going to collect them, you're going to organize them. Where are you going to store them, or where is somebody else going to store them? And storage, by the way, takes resources too. So maybe we should talk to the National Archives and say, hey, how about a good But, and again, you're seeing this in other fields too, as well as daily life. The better records we can keep, the more the future can reconstruct what we live in. That may not be a good thing, I'm not sure, but
Oh, Meta's taking care of that for us. We have a red microphone somewhere?
Hi, my name is Claire Drennan, and I'm not yet a member, but did he actually have resources around him that helped him build this, or did he have to get them from somewhere?
Okay, first, I want to thank you on your desire for a better future by saying you're not yet a member, which implies that you will be a member.
Well, thank you for thinking.
And as and second, we really don't know that much. You know, there's desire, or the record, and again, one of the problems here, not everybody was keeping records or keeping good records. This is why publication is so important, because you don't have to keep it for it to be preserved if it's in a magazine or a book. But you know, if you want to have fun, think of, okay, if you want people of the next generation or to know about your life or your society, what should they know, or what information or what sources you think that they should have, and maybe you should be doing something about that. That's your homework. No, it's a thoughtful project. Okay.
Do we have a red microphone somewhere? Blue microphone? Red, blue, anybody? Okay.
No red,
in
white,
that
or
case,
blue?
I think we're completed the question and answer period, and before you go, we have some tokens of appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
A framed copy of the announcement of your talk signed by all of the members of the General Committee, but not on our own behalf, on behalf of all the members. A signed copy of Volume 17, First Edition, of the Bulletin of the PSW, in which you will find 3 histories of PSW, one written by a person who was one of the founders, and the founding documents, and the address of the first president at his first address, where he discusses why the society was founded, why they called it the Philosophical Society, and also a still instructive discourse on how to conduct a scientific meeting, in which he basically says, be ruthless in your criticism, but be respectful at all times, and do not engage in personal attacks.
Well, thank you for that opportunity.
And
Thank
oh
you.
yes, there's one other thing I forgot. It's our ribbon, which is emblazoned on its sides with 3 stripes, emblematic of the symbol for the unit of inductance, which is the Henry, named for the founder of PSW, Joseph Henry.
Okay.
And with that,
Thank you very much for the honor.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well, before you go, there are a few announcements to make. Now, note that there are a few changes to the schedule from what I said in the past, which is why you should always check our website to make sure that you have up-to-date information. And look out for the lecture notices and the invitation that's sent to members to the reception and dinner, which go out about 10 days before each lecture. So the next lecture will be at the 2,533rd meeting on March 20th, 2 weeks from today, and the speaker will be Bill Diamond. He is the president and CEO of the SETI Institute, and he'll be speaking about SETI's research program on the question of life, its origins and prevalence, and on detecting signs of exobiology, from fossils to cells, and perhaps to some sign of intelligence. And that will include discussion of its NASA-funded work. It promises to be a scientifically rigorous presentation, so you can leave the aluminum foil at home, and one that will stimulate the imagination. There are several PSW talks on this topic relating to the Drake equation and various approaches to this question of exobiology and the possibility of intelligent life elsewhere, and how we would know if we saw something that perhaps was a sign of it. So have some fun with it. The rest of the schedule is here. Our talk after March 20th will be on April 10th, the 2,500th and 34th meeting. The speaker will be Amy Mainzer. She is a professor at UCLA, and she runs the planetary the NEO mission. And she is one of the leaders in developing an awareness that it makes sense for us to know about big things out there that might come crashing to Earth and cause us to go extinct like the dinosaurs. But so NEO is the Near Earth Objects Survey. And I think, I'm not sure, was it launched or it's going to be launched? I can't remember. But anyway, she'll be talking about that. And then a related subject after that, on April 24th at the 2,535th meeting, Harris Lewin from Arizona State University will be talking about the Earth Biogenome Project. So there's kind of a theme here about life on Earth and life maybe somewhere else that we're pursuing at the PSW this year so far. Now, the Henry is not yet ready to be announced, so we'll skip over that one. On May 29th at 2,537th meeting, we're having two people. One is from SETI, A. Simeon, and he runs the Allen array, which is a real radio telescope array, pretty sophisticated one that was just updated, and he'll be talking about that. And then Aaron Thompson, well, from NVIDIA will join him. So you might want to know why we're having somebody from NVIDIA and somebody who's going to talk about a radio telescope. Because the SETI Institute, in collaboration with NVIDIA, is planning to implement a completely agentic AI to run the telescope. But not just run the telescope, to plan the observations, to decide what to observe, how to observe it, to carry out the observing program, collect the data, analyze the data, and report the data. So that should be fun, provided. Then on June 11th, at the 2,538th meeting, Earl Miller from MIT will be talking about the neuroscience of executive function and consciousness, which will be one of those really fabulously interesting talks, because nobody can agree on what consciousness is or how to know if something has it. But I swear, ChatGPT. That, by the way, is a Thursday. This is one of those rare occasions, because of a scheduling conflict here at the club. It's a Thursday, so put that in your calendar. And then we're rounding up the spring semester with a talk by Doug Wallace on June 26th at the 2,539th meeting. Doug is at the University of Pennsylvania, and he'll be talking about mitochondrial medicine. So what is that? Well, it turns out that deficiencies in mitochondria, which we used to think were not very important to health or disease, they turn out to actually be very important in certain diseases. So you'll learn a lot about mitochondria, which are pretty interesting things, and about their role in disease. And the last thing, which is actually in next fiscal year, but it's the end of this year for practical book is for members only, and that's our annual business meeting, which will be on July 17th. Please check the PSW website often for up-to-date information on the upcoming lectures. Plans do change, and keep in mind that be on the lookout. About 10 days before each lecture, typically the Wednesday of the week before, you should get your invitation to the reception and dinner if you're a member. And if you're just on our friends list, you should get a notice of the lecture itself. Okay, so people who keep missing things, that's when you should start looking for it. Yes? The first meeting in September will be 9/11, which I unfortunately remember all too well. With that, if you haven't signed up to get our announcements of the lectures, you can do so very easily on our website. You can also have our calendar automatically update your calendar by signing up for the automatic updates. So let's thank our crew for producing this meeting. Before you go, remember to return your badges to the bin in the back, but don't do it until you leave the social hour because, you know, people might want to know who you are if they don't already. And I will accept a motion to adjourn the 2,532nd meeting to the social hour. Second? All members in favor? All members opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned unanimously to the social hour. Thank you all for coming.